just going to run through the slide deck that we presented to lead into the live demo. Presented this at European Identity Conference, May 2019. Plan is to refine this a little bit and show it again at Identiverse in June 2019 and again at MyData in September 2019. There's a consent in action track at MyData, and we're going to be several people from this work group, as it happens, have presentations and sessions in the consent in action track at MyData. Okay, so Privacy Control Panel. So what we covered in the presentation is really these three things. So this concept of a personal data receipt, otherwise known as consent receipt, the demo itself, and then discuss the work of this working group. And this is the underpinning key messages for the work of this work group. So simple approach, standardized data format, and then do what you will, invent, innovate. You'll see how there'll be a new data set that you can work on, and I can't wait to see the explosion of applications that come out of this. So we're going to start off with what's a receipt. Now, I want everyone to put entirely out of your mind the concept of personal data. Just sort of set that aside. This section is talking about what a sales receipt is, just the regular sales receipt that everyone knows about. You know, everyone gets offered these, you take them, you put them in a pile, you put them in a shoebox, whatever. A sales receipt has a few characteristics which are common. So it's a personal record. It's an independent record that you, the receipt holder, have. It's independent of the receipt issuer. Once you have your receipt, the issuer can't do anything with it. It's in your possession, in your control. It's a form of evidence that something happened, and it has metadata, right? So timestamps, transaction details. For electronic receipts, you probably have some sort of cryptographic elements, that sort of thing. And significantly, it points at the receipt issuers' policy statements. So that's a sales receipt. I'm going to talk a little bit about this thing that I've dubbed the agreement flow. Now remember, this has nothing to do with personal data. It's very important to keep the personal data, person identifiable information concepts separate for now. We'll link them back in a few minutes. So the agreement flow, quite simply, the top swim lane is the service provider, the vendor, let's say, and the bottom is the person. The vendor invents a service, makes it available, advertises it, markets it. The person finds it, and they say, well, okay, I'll give it a try. So the person requests the service. The service provider does the things that vendors do, right? They provide descriptions, they provide various notices, and they offer terms. Now, terms might be something like, this widget for this price, or I'll barter, this service for that service. Some valuable consideration is exchanged, and limitations, provisos, warranties, liabilities, all that stuff goes into the terms. The person, in the simplest form, takes a look at the terms and says, well, yes or no. Do I like the terms or not? If they don't like the terms, they cancel and go find another vendor, right? But let's say they like the terms. Now, very, very clearly in this very, very simple flow, there's no negotiation. Let's just say that there's it's an Amazon widget for the price, and that's it. You can't barter the price. You can't negotiate it. The more complex flows we can deal with in the future, but just the simple, no personal data, standard sales flow, this is what we're talking about here. So the person says, yeah, okay, I like the terms, good enough. There's a meeting of the minds between the person and the vendor. And they both have the intention and positive intent to enter into an agreement based on the terms and acceptance of those terms. The vendor is almost always required. In fact, it's hard to find a case where the vendor or service provider is not required to keep records. Financial records, your bookkeeper and tax people kind of like financial records. Some sort of transactional record is kept. Provide consideration. So, there's this concept called valuable consideration as specified in the terms. So the service provider provides the valuable consideration, which might be the thing or the service, and the individual provides their end of the deal, valuable consideration, which might be money, right, in the simplest case. Some point in the future, the agreement ends. So this should look pretty familiar to everyone. This is how agreements typically, semi-formal and formal agreements are typically done. And here are the key points in the agreement flow. So there's an offer and acceptance of terms, there's a meeting of the minds, there's an actual intention to enter into the agreement, there's record keeping and exchange of valuable consideration. So this is nothing new. This is what we do all day, every day when we buy and sell stuff. So here's the kicker. We all know about sales receipts because they're required by law in some places, or you just expect them for all the reasons you would want a sales receipt. But why on earth aren't we getting personal data receipts? Like, what if there's personal data in the mix? Why don't we get a receipt? So when personal data is involved, as we all know, there are additional obligations, requirements, and notice and transparency elements and accountability elements that get into the mix. This is not an exhaustive list, but in the privacy notice, you'd have pointers to the privacy statement, the purposes of processing, contact information, and then details that only data protection officers know and love, not regular people. It's the fine print in the privacy notices and statements, as we all know. And this is a redrawing of the agreement flow, showing where those new elements, if personal data is involved, would fit. We've got the privacy statement and notice. It's in the notices box. Surprising. Data subject rights in GDPR language start somewhere in the mix. Let's not talk about the details of specifically where, but if you provide personal data to a data controller in GDPR language, you have data subject rights associated with that data. The missing thing is record keeping on the person's side. We know that record keeping is required on the service provider side for sales, for personal data collection and processing, but the missing thing for the person is the personal data receipt, the consent receipt. Keep that in mind. There's a gap that we're trying to fill here. And just to reiterate this point, the agreement flow shows that with personal data, there is no independent personal record keeping function. It just doesn't exist. And when you talk to people, vendors, service providers, this doesn't enter into their thinking because the data controller, the vendor, they've got all the records they need. But it's very rare to have a vendor understand that there's value in having personal records that are independent of the vendor's records. So this is just a rewriting of the sales receipt definitions, characteristics, with personal data in the mix. So personal data receipt is a personal record, completely independent of the issuer. It's some form of evidence of the event, and it has metadata. So what happened when? And important for us is it points or contains the issuer's policy statements. So things like, what was the privacy statement at the time? What was the form of notice? How was it collected? And so on. And as we all know, these things are covered in the Kantara consent receipt specification. So one of the scenarios is that the personal data receipt lets you exercise your data rights. What does a consent receipt look like? Well, these are actual implementations of Kantara consent receipts in some of our products some of our workgroup participants' products. Okay, so let's talk about the demo. So let's set up a scenario. So it's a few years from now, and you're a very, very minimal internet user. Like you go on maybe once a month, and you've agreed at 500 services for data processing. Now what do you do? Well, clearly, you're going to use your Kantara Initiative Privacy Control Panel. Now, let's be clear. The control panel is invented, made up software. It's not even vaporware. It's just invented to show how these receipt things might flow. It looks like a dashboard with action buttons. That's why it's a control panel, not a dashboard. You'll notice that our shoebox API storage place is full of receipts, and they're nicely tabulated and displayed into the dashboard format. My expectation is that over time, this class of software will actually come to exist. Right now, I don't think it exists, but once people have a shoebox full of receipts, then why wouldn't it exist? The demo is very simply: person gets a receipt, stores it, and views it. That's it. These are the products that we're displaying, that we're showing in this presentation. If you have a product and you want to be on the list, we can integrate you into the demo. So Consentua is a consent management platform. So they offer APIs for enterprises to do consent related things like display notices, prompts the person for consent, store the data, manage the consents afterwards, and that sort of thing. So what Richard's done is he's connected. He wrote a Chrome extension that watches for calls to the Consentua APIs, and at the right time, he creates a consent receipt in the Kantara format and puts it to the API that Ubisecure created for the demo. In other words, Ubisecure, Oscar and Keith, created a shoebox API where we can stuff receipts. So let's take a look at the Consentua demo. Now, the important thing here, the cup shop, paper cup shop, was not customized in any way for this demo. This is the regular demo calling the Consentua APIs. That's it. So you'll notice that after a pause, Consentua on the regular demo asks, would you like a cookie? So let's say yes. I'll close that. Now I want you to sort of keep an eye on this minuscule C up there. So that's actually the Chrome plugin that Richard created. Now you can't see, I'm sure, that it says 2. What that indicates is during this session, 2 consent receipts have been pushed to the API. So I'll just go next. Ask me for a cookie again. I'll say nothing. Okay, so we'll just add some cups to the cart. Fine. We will check out. Oh, so it's Consentua is asking me, paper cup shops ask me, location information. Sure. And we'll wait a couple of heartbeats, and the number on the Consentua Chrome extension has gone up to 3. So, so far we're doing pretty well. We're making a number count up on screen. Let me show you on the back end, on the API. So what I've done is I've written a couple of scripts to query the API just to show you that they're actually going somewhere. So right now we've got 48 receipts in the shoebox because I've run this a few times. So let's take a look at number 48. So this is receipt number 48. Now, of course, when we get the rest of the stuff hooked up for the Identiverse demo in a few weeks, I won't have to do this on the command line. We'll actually show them on a live dashboard. But if you can see that, if just notice the time, it is basically a few minutes ago It was created, and the PI controller is no now, which is the parent of Consentua, and the service is Paperclip Shop Demo, and the purpose. Oh right, I'm not sharing it. Hold on. This invisible screen, which is now visible. This is the receipt and command line. Basically, it's JSON output from the API. So the last receipt that we put on there was the send me the newsletter. So I'm just gonna go to the previous one, and this one was, the purpose was collecting the address from the location data, right? And these are the ones we just created, just to prove to the audience that it's live. And that's kind of it. So that's the Consentua and UbiSecure side. Now, when we click on the icon up there, the Chrome add-on extension, it shows the UbiSecure dashboard. Now, right now, this dashboard is not connected to the API, ran out of time, but by Identiverse, this will actually be a control panel dashboard that pulls data from the API, just like I did on the command line there. Okay. So that's the Consentua and UbiSecure one. Impressive, eh? Right? Taking mouse clicks and making it into data. Going to show another one. So in the EIC demo, we had Sphere Identity do a live showing of where the Kantara receipts fit into the application. So we showed, where it fits into the various flows, the fact that you can use it to revoke, screenshots or actual live display of the application. Transmute recorded a 2-minute video to show where receipts fit into their application concept. So trying to get the imagination flowing in the audience. Okay, so what Digimy's done so far, and still working on developing it. So if you recall, Digimy is a personal data store, a personal data library ecosystem. And what they've done is they've created this thing called consent mobility, which allows the individual to, for the moment, locate a JSON file on their storage and load it into their Digimy library. So we'll do a browse for a receipt. Now, as part of the various scripts and stuff, I made it create a JSON output of the receipt. So we'll take a look at number 48, open it up, take a look at the contents, and you'll see that this one is the send me the newsletter receipt from this morning. Okay, and we'll send it to my Digimy library. So this is the import your consent receipts pop-up, various details, and swipe to import it. Fancy graphics, and it goes. And then things happen in the app. So now this is showing the consent access certificate dashboard, which is the dashboard that Digimy uses to show where you've agreed to stuff. Now, this is not connected to the import that we just showed, but that's coming soon. Okay? But the idea is that you can look at the various things. There's various pop-ups. There's various action buttons. And that's what we showed.